My name is Charles Wratto. I'm the director and founder of the Violence Prevention Center. As a former child soldier, I felt the need to help other former child soldiers and current child soldiers to engage in the area of peace building, violence prevention through various mechanisms. These include sports, education, rehabilitation, community participation, so on and so forth. There are increasing number of children today involved in violence, and one of the ways that we can achieve a sort of peace in most of the communities is through youth participation in the various programs that I've mentioned and more. At the moment, I'm here in Bosnia to speak on the issue of democracy, reconciliation, post-conflict reconstruction, peace building, as well as to establish new networks and sort of a partnership with the Post-Conflict Research Center here in Bosnia. Our goal also is to see how we can have some sort of exchange between the Post-Conflict Center here in Bosnia and what we do back home in Africa. We look forward to a future partnership that are going to be healthy and productive, not just for former child soldiers or war-affected youth and children, but also people living within communities like, well-developed communities where there are some forms of violence. I'm also a researcher, and I've done extensive research in some of the world's most dangerous places. For instance, I've been in Gao, Timbuktu, northern Mali. I've been in northern Nigeria, had extensive research in Boko Haram, with Boko Haram victims, government soldiers, prisoners, Boko Haram themselves. One of the reasons I do this is to understand the perspective of each group that are involved, because each party has a point, have a reason for going into a certain form of conflict. And my goal is to understand why these groups built up certain ideologies and why they use the ideologies to recruit more children. With this understanding, it helps me provide the knowledge that is needed for conflict prevention or violence prevention in the communities in the area with which I work. As I understood, with my interviews and my field work with several guys involved in extremism, the whole idea is sometimes narrow, but sometimes also very complex. Sometimes there's a total rejection in the case of Boko Haram, for instance. There is a total rejection of Western education, and the mindset seems to not, it's something that will not change anytime soon. The war, as I understand it, has been going on for 14 years. And as I understand it, as I saw from my experience, they are well equipped, well trained, very well equipped, and much more trained if you will compare them to national armies within the countries they operate. So it's not something that we should just look at and say, well, these are just some kind of groups that will go away soon. No, they are very well structured. They have people to send over to other countries to learn specific tactical techniques, intelligent techniques, and they go back and they apply these various strategies that they'll learn from other parts of the world back to their areas. And they use that to control their areas of influence, to expand their influence and to control the local population. In addition to that, they also use not just violence, but also persuasion to buy over a local population. And this is done very easily through different forms of propaganda. Sometimes it could be in the form of systemic problem that do exist within those communities. Sometimes it could be a religious problem, and this doesn't just extend to Islam alone, it's extend to other religions as well. Yes, I do believe in the process of rehabilitation, because when you go through war, you have lots of different experiences, and also there is a need to always go through a sort of healing process. This doesn't necessarily mean that because you went through war, you have a mental breakdown or you are destroyed, but it also means that you could be affected even indirectly and you may not know. So this is why sometimes we also encourage the process of rehabilitation. It shouldn't necessarily be on the larger scale as it's seen in the West or other society, but each society has its own mechanism that is very unique and that is very that is workable within its own community. And these mechanisms, the rehabilitation processes, can be used to rehabilitate children or even victims of war or victims of genocide to get involved in future community building processes and future participation processes of peace building. I've met victims who were Some of them are very old women. They were raped, they were beaten, they were destroyed, their villages were destroyed, they were thrown away. I met a specific old lady. She should be about 7 to 8 years old. And she told me how she was beaten and how she was raped, and she felt she was dead. But miraculously, she felt the pain from her wound the next morning, and she felt she was still alive. And one of the things she told me was she really wished she was there. She really wished she was in her life. And if that could be done to a 7 to 8 years old woman, there are a lot of other stories from younger victims who, some of them were either abused by government troops or abused by the Islamic groups. And this keeps on to build up. This network keeps on building. The network of violence keeps on building, because as one group and one community is affected either by the government, the larger portion of that group will go and join the extremist groups. And if a larger portion of the extremist group, of a population is affected by extremist group, they also shift over to the government. And that's why there's a need to kind of find a balance in addressing these things. On the moment I'm working, my team and I, we are basically working on a school project. We want to build a school that's going to serve three purposes. The first purpose would be to provide high school education for children. That's going to be from 1st grade to 12th grade, because one of the areas we're building the school, the nearest school to that place is 3 days walk away. And when I understood that children in that community stopped going to school altogether, I felt that was the best place to locate the school. Next reason is to turn it into a peace building center where we can train former child soldiers as peace builders, not just as national peace builders, but also as regional peace builders, because they are strategically located. They are well placed to interact with different factions, different players, different parties in conflicts. They have the understanding, they can be easily trusted. So what is needed is just to give them a bit of added knowledge that they can be able to construct their thoughts very well in their processes, and how they can gather the data, so how they can present their thoughts to the parties involved. And that's one of the purposes the school is going to be serving. And apart from teaching former child soldiers to be peace builders, we have to teach them other skills, like carpentry, missionary, and many other skills. We want to teach them there as well. Then we will have a night school period where we will teach women other skills. Some women in that community still want to go back to school and have a high school certificate at least. So we will provide high school education for such women. And there are other issues that relates to gender in our society. Also, issue of rape still occurs a lot in our communities. And that's something that me as a man, I cannot do. So we will need women to train women in this area. But the school does provide us the sanctuary that we need to function as a team. Through my work, I've been able to train approximately 2,000 or more former child soldiers, and I work with lots of them. We've done these various campaigns. In 2015, we had a peace building campaign where we used sports to unite over 100,000 youths from all across Liberia. I've also inspired these guys to a certain degree that they don't have to wait for a foreign organization to come in to help. They have to develop themselves, and that's the perspective from which we are working oftentimes. But also, there is a need for us to, as an international body, there's a need to support us, to provide a support mechanism for these people, because these guys, they are still vulnerable in a way. On the one sense, they want to reintegrate into society and be useful to society. In other areas, guys like them are needed for other armed groups, so they can be brought over as mercenaries to go to other borders, neighboring countries to fight. So the point is, how do we provide this support mechanism to keep them together? I've been able to help myself through the help of other people. I was able to go back to school. I was 22 years, so when I went back to school, I achieved my education from BSc all the way to PhD level. And I still feel there's a need to do more. And the PhD was not for me as a person, but because of the different narrative that I heard when I came out of the war. For instance, child soldiers are lost generation. They are destroyed, they are mentally broken, they are not of any use to society, they are not useful to their countries. And all of these kind of narratives seems not to resonate quite well with me. And I felt there's a need to, on the one hand, achieve a certain level of success through education that I will use to inspire people of my background to also do well for themselves. And I've seen this across the areas I've done research, I've seen former child soldiers with master's degrees. Some of them are entrepreneurs, some of them are ordinary taxi drivers and bike drivers finding ways to survive. But the emphasis here is we as a team, as a war body, we have to really pay attention to how we can help former child soldiers to reintegrate, not just to participate in society with family members, but also for them to have something that can bring in, for instance, food to their family, that they can be able to take care of themselves, or they can be able to have some sort of education. Then the mentality of giving money to buy marijuana or cocaine as a rehabilitation benefit, it's completely wrong. Because when you do that, the money is going to blow up fast, and most of these guys will not have anything to fall back on. And they also need to understand that not all child soldiers take cocaine or take alcohol or take drugs. For instance, I never drank, I never smoked, I never touched any drugs in my entire life. So there are different groups of people, and we shouldn't always put them in the same basket. This means that our approach to integrating them into society should also be different. A child soldier will claim he smokes and drinks. If you're going to hand out money, support money to buy alcohol and drugs, of course, he will say, yeah, he smokes and drinks. But if you're offering something different, those who don't smoke, those who don't drink, will find usefulness in what you're offering them. And those who are addicted to drugs can be treated differently. So I think we really have to look deep into this area of how we can help former child soldiers sit back on their feet, such that they are not moving over from one country to another as mercenaries, as I've seen personally.